Kyogre has been one of the most requested Pokemon on the channel, and for good reason. A lot of you thought initially that it would be a contender to get past that Mewtwo bar, which is the standard for a great Generation 1 run. Earlier we did Mega Rayquaza, and today is part 2 of the Weather Trio runs, which means we're taking Kyogre, we're slapping on some Primal Reversion, making it shiny, and we're seeing just how overpowered it would be in Pokemon Red. Kyogre and Groudon are already top tier, but their primal forms push things even further. Mega Mewtwo X and Y and Mega Rayquaza may sit at the top with 780 base stat total, but the primals aren't that far behind at 770. For Kyogre, that means 180 base special, 150 base attack, and enough speed to stay ahead of nearly everything. Things are looking great, and the learn set is also stacked. I'm going to be using that same Gen 10 moveset from the original Kyogre video, and it all starts with that signature move Origin Pulse. It's basically a slightly weaker but slightly more accurate Hydro Pump. I did swap out Water Pulse for Bubble Beam, I added an Ancient Power for that Omni Boost chance, and we round things off with Body Slam for a really solid starting set. And the only other move that's worth noting this early is Aqua Tail at level 9. It's a 90 base power water move with 90% accuracy, and it always lets me down. I don't know what it is about this move, but it just misses so much. But if you flip over to those TMs, this is where Kyogre truly kind of sets itself apart. As a water type, you're used to the usual stuff like Surf, Ice Beam, Blizzard, but this Pokemon reaches further with Thunderbolt, Earthquake, and you could even use Rock Slide if you want to get a little wacky with it. And there's not much to say about the early game. No one thought there would be. It's minimum battles, but now's as good of a time as any to mention that this is a blind run. At the time of recording this voiceover, I have not done any optimizations at all yet. I just wanted to get my initial thoughts down without knowing what the best strategies would be. That process starts very early with the first mandatory bug catcher, and I usually play blind runs cautiously. I'm going to pick up all the rare candies, and I'm going to test out weaker moves just to kind of find out what works. And in this case, Bubble Beam fails to knock out the Weedle, which means that Origin Pulse is probably needed, but after that, it's pretty much a straight line sprint straight to Brock. Like a lot of times, this intro is just a formality. The rocks are double weak to water, you already know. 2 Bubble Beams will end the battle pretty much as fast as it starts, so Kyogre's going to grab a very fast and clean first badge split. Moving ahead, I have to mention an issue that I ran into with the original run, one of my main problems with it. Aqua Tail's gonna show up soon, and while 90% accuracy doesn't usually bother me, in fact, I often advocate for riskier, low accuracy moves because it gives you a better time, and a lot of people fall into this confirmation bias with it. It does become a slight problem here when your 2 best damage options are 85% accurate and 90% accurate. You're gonna miss. That's the beginning and the end of it. And this run overall reminded me a lot of Gyarados. In the optimized version of that run, I kept Hydro Pump from start to finish, and I relied heavily on that 80% accuracy. And I gotta be truthful here, it does take some persistence. Sometimes you gotta do extra runs if you want to avoid time losses from bad luck and just missing a lot. And I'm not gonna highlight every miss in this run, but just know that this run had its fair share, including a couple of back-to-back Aqua Tail misses, and those really stood out to me. Inside Mount Moon, there are no optional battles, and just to reinforce my blind run approach, I do pick up the rare candy here. If I don't need it, I'll just cut it out later, but I always grab at least 10 candies. I always skip the Power Plant candy pretty much every run, and I'm usually going to skip the Victory Road one. My first thought here was to see how bad Misty would be. We're very underleveled, but the good AI will force her to stick with Tackle. I'm going to test out Body Slam and see if it's enough, and it kind of is. The damage is kind of low, and since Starmie likes to crit, it is a pretty close race. Now, the order of battles overall is something that I might need to revisit later, but for now, it works, and we get a second badge. The extra levels from Misty is pretty good enough to power us up for Nugget Bridge, and I had a feeling that Origin Pulse would be the answer for Pidgeotto, but here's an example of just missing moves. I missed not once, but twice, and that leads to a Sand Attack, and that lowered accuracy definitely slows the battle down. I don't outright lose here, and I eventually hit my moves, and we eventually win, but this is just a great example of things not going your way, but fortunately for us, Kyogre is very resilient, and we can just shrug it off. Now, my friends, you know what time it is. Nugget Bridge and that path to Bill's house contains the single highest cluster of mandatory battles in the entire game, and with accuracy being an issue, I did start to wonder really early if Bubble Beam would just be overall better here. And there's one big decision that I made for the blind run. Calm Mind. We get this move at level 18, and it's essentially just a clone of Growth, which will raise your special stat by 1 stage. I barely mentioned it in the first video because I just didn't think it was necessary, and it might not be this time either, but it is something that I will test pretty heavily when I optimize everything. The logic here is that our special is already so high, and with our coverage being so strong, that Calm Mind just wouldn't save you any time. I could be wrong, but I did skip it here in the blind run just to avoid the move slot limitations that it would ultimately bring, but it is an interesting option if I do need it. Down on the SSN, we don't need Body Slam because we already have it, but I still stop in for the Gentleman Candy as is tradition in a blind run. Now with these extra levels, since the last time we fought the rival, the third battle goes down without any trouble, very quick, very easy, and then we hit a classic water type roadblock, Lieutenant Surge. Whether it's Dugong or Gyarados or any other top tier water run, Raichu's Thunderbolt usually forces you to use some candies, but with Kyogre, I'm going to take him on at just a lowly level 22. This battle starts off exactly how you would expect. Aquatail can easily handle the Voltorb and the Pikachu, but I do miss. Luckily, it just uses Thunder Shock instead of Thunder Wave, so I'm still in pretty good shape. Now, the problem here is that after I level up, I'm only going to speed tie Raichu. Now, obviously, Surge is immediately going to win the first tie, and it goes straight for Thunderbolt, straight for the jugular, and I'm honestly impressed about how well Kyogre tanks it. Origin Pulse lands, but it doesn't one-shot. I win the second speed tie, and we get through the battle, but this is one you would probably need to look at a little bit closer. And since this is a blind run, there is no split data for now. I'll get that ready when we do the optimized run later. And because I didn't learn Calm Mind, I'm going to go ahead and learn Thunderbolt here. Even now, before getting to the optimization process, I'm already thinking that you would probably save Thunderbolt for the end of the game if you were using Calm Mind. But for now, and looking ahead to the next little bit of the game, everything's pretty trivial. So I say we pick back up in Celadon. I keep the shop buy really simple here. All I'm going to do is buy a fresh water and basically get my repels and just get out. Now there are some nuance that you could think about here. You do learn Ice Beam in 10 levels at level 36. You could also rush it with a fresh water, or do you use Blizzard? And that's something to perhaps think about, because at the bare minimum you'll probably need something for Erika eventually, but I don't really think about it too much right now. We just kind of get in and out. Now let's zoom through a couple of sections here. I'm gonna go to the Rocket Hideout first. Not really much to say, we kind of just handle everything with ease. You can see Giovanni in the background. You already know we got water moves. Kangaskhan does a little bit of damage to me, but it doesn't really matter. That's another miss for the miss counter if you're keeping track at home. And for Pokemon Tower, just like the last rival, we can easily take care of Pidgeotto more efficient than ever now that we got Thunderbolt, so we can take it out. And we can actually just take out the Ghastlies with a single Origin Pulse, so there's no worries there. Now I'm going to make that pivot over to Silphco, because the goal of today, and we'll talk about this very soon, is a full bag. I've kind of talked about this a lot in my last few runs, and essentially I just want to make the gym leader text as short as possible, save a little bit of time. Now the problem here is that by the time I do the bare minimum path here in Silph, I'm only going to be level 31, which is an absurdly low level to take on rival number 5, but since we're doing a blind run, I really want to test the limits. Perhaps this is a part of the game where using candies or even having Calm Mind could help you out, but until you really test it out, you don't know. I do want Earthquake, but like I've been saying a lot as well, I don't want to get it until after Silph is over, so we will pick that up as well. But without further ado, I think it's time we just take a look at rival number 5. First things first, Pidgeot actually outspeeds us, which means it goes first. It doesn't really do much, but the more pressing issue is that a Thunderbolt cannot one-shot. It gets really close, it could be a range, But you know what that leads to? It leads to a sand attack. And where there's one sand attack, there's more sand attacks. Now all of a sudden my accuracy is very much dropped. It's in the red. You can see it on the overlay. And we are not in a good position. I struggle to hit an Aqua Tail on the lowly little Growlithe here. Eventually I take it out. And where the real problems come in is on execute. I'm not even sure if I could one-shot it anyway, but it does paralyze me and puts a leech seed on me, which is just double trouble here. I'm struggling to keep up. Things aren't looking very good, but we got to just play it out like always. And with Alakazam coming up, we try our best, and I actually land an early body slam. It does heavy damage, but at this low of a level, it's just not enough to one-shot the yellow menace. It lives, and eventually everything's gonna catch up to me, and I get taken down the worst way possible. That's by a leech seed tick. I do make the decision here to leave and go battle one singular trainer that'll get me up to level 32. I thought that since we were so close to one-shotting, it might help, and it turns out that's not the case. But the key difference between this fight and the last fight is that I avoid sand attack, which leaves me much more confident in my abilities overall. Growlithe was never going to be an issue, but something that I didn't really think about is just kind of how tanky execute is, and I think we'll have to do a little bit more thinking about this fight because body slam only does half its health. Now if we get paralyzed, that's not great, but even a single leech seed will allow execute to survive multiple body slams. You'll need 3, so that's not good at all. And with all that said, we do actually get lucky. We're not paralyzed, we take it out, and that means that we're just in a pretty good position. And once again, it looks like maybe 35 would be the level to go for this fight because we can't one-shot Alakazam even though we have 150 base attack and body slam, but we're still healthy and we do have Thunderbolt at the end. I accidentally use a body slam, doesn't really matter because there's not much Blastoise can do. 2 Thunderbolts would comfortably take this out, but it does hang on a little bit. Makes the end of the fight a little bit awkward. We get down to like 31 HP, but a win's a win, and we kind of discovered that this is not a good fight and we probably need to prepare more for this situation. Remember, I did pick up Earthquake after Silpha's over, and one of the problems right now is that we're not level 36. Having Ice Beam would easily take on Erika, but the more focal point right now is heading down to the Safari Zone, and here I will fill up my bags to make the next couple of gym leaders. Skip that text, I mention it too much, it's probably annoying to hear it so much, but it's just an important part to just saving times on the run. Even though my bag management is going to look good here and I'm going to pull it off, I did have to end up dropping some things here and there, because you're never going to have your bags perfectly done on the first blind run. There's just no way to know what you need and don't need to have full bags at a certain spot or whatever the case may be. And a slight little deviation that you can probably fix up just a little bit, probably by just using candies to do rival number 5, is that I'm actually going to go face Koga now. At this point, I have already decided to get rid of Origin Pulse. I don't think this is a Gyarados situation. We could probably talk all day about Gyarados, but the fact of the matter is Gyarados doesn't have that great of special and Kyogre has 180, so I feel pretty comfortable taking Surf over the lesser accurate but more powerful move. And you can see in a situation like this where I'm basically one-shotting most of Koga's Pokemon, it seems like it's the right call, but at the end of the day we're not going to know until we look at stuff, but that's fine. And we do also hit level 36. We got Ice Beam, we got Surf, we're kind of set up and ready to go, so let's kind of get this train rolling. There's not much to say about Erika. 3 Ice Beams up and down will do the trick, no need to even linger any further on this. And that's because it's time for a brisk swim down to Cinnabar. I could think of nothing more terrifying than riding on the back of a primal reverted legendary Pokemon. The little fishermen sitting on their little docks are probably sitting in awe. And I do have to talk about a couple of things. In the Rayquaza video, I really stressed that in Pokemon Yellow, the wild encounter levels are higher and you really have to pay attention. And the thing that makes a slow level up Pokemon just so much better in Red version in general is that you can be a lot lower level in Pokemon Mansion and in Victory Road. For now, we'll just talk about Pokemon Mansion, because in Yellow version, if you're around level 44, that means there's only one very rare encounter on the table that you can encounter on the 3rd floor, whereas in Pokemon Red, if you were level 41, you would achieve that same result. In fact, the highest Pokemon that you can fight in Pokemon Red is a level 42 Muck or Weezing, depending on the version that you're playing. And I'm saying all that, but in the footage, I'm not even high enough level and I still get an encounter. I'm also going to pick up Blizzard just in case I need it for like execute at the end of the game, you never know. And we'll talk about Victory Road because it was such a huge part of that Rayquaza run, but that's pretty much all you need to know, other than if perhaps, maybe, in some dimension, if TM28 is actually
Doomstoner. brother.
Or not? Does anybody know? And now we get to perhaps the most shocking part of the run. I know this is going to be hard to believe, but sit down. But Kyogre does very well against Blaine. I can actually just spam surf and just beat him. That's something that I never really thought would happen, but you learn something new every day, don't you? And I'm going to keep this train rolling. We're just going to go all the way to the end of the game. We're just going to finish up the last couple of gym leaders. For Sabrina, we knew that we could probably one-shot the Kadabra, but I do fail to knock out the Mr. Mime. And more importantly, something that you might want to look into, maybe just one extra level here would help, is that Surf can't one-shot the Venomoth, which leads to paralysis, which could lead to a more sticky situation with the Alakazam. Now, after a little bit of back and forth, I eventually do pull it out, but it wasn't comfortable, it was kind of slow, and I say we just head straight into the final gym. And I don't really know what you want me to say here. Once again, Surf is absolutely going to decimate, and there's only one little point to say here. Once again, just being a little bit of a higher level would help, because Doug Trio actually outspeeds me. It goes for a sand attack. This little dirty sausage trio, these three little sausages actually dared to try to toss some sand on me. Luckily it missed, and I just get to the battle anyway. But that's 8 badges down. Let's not waste any time. Let's go straight into rival number 6. I start off by getting an Ice Beam crit. I do think this probably matters. It's not like there's much the Pidgeot can do anyway, but it does kind of set us up to know that, hey, I probably wouldn't do enough damage, because all things considered, being level 42 at this stage in the game is incredibly low and not something I would recommend unless you're doing a blind run. Now, we actually start rolling through the fight, and I'm thinking, hey, this is looking pretty easy, and this continues all the way up till I get to Alakazam. And once again, this Alakazam has Psychic. It's a pretty formidable opponent, and when you don't outspeed it, you're already hurt. I'm poisoned. I don't even remember why I'm poisoned, but I am. I can't one-shot it. It gets off some damage, and I'm getting pretty low, but I'm surviving. Now, I'm poisoned. I know I cannot one-shot Blastoise. That's the problem here. Thunderbolt does a lot of damage. Not quite enough. I get hit by poison. It takes me down to 26 HP, and I'm able to finish it off. So we win, but like a lot of battles in this run, it's a little bit slower. I think with some candy usage, maybe hitting that next damage rounding threshold, being a little bit stronger, a little bit faster, a little bit wiser, a little bit whatever you need, I think this would be a little bit better of a fight, but we got the end of the game ahead of us now. There is no split data like I mentioned earlier. We'll see it later, but our time is not bad at all considering that this is a blind run with a lot of things to clean up. But I will go back to the Mega Rayquaza video and I'll talk about Victory Road. In Pokemon Yellow, you absolutely need to be level 50 in here or you're just going to bleed a lot of time like we saw in that initial run. But in Pokemon Red, the magic number is level 46. I do use a few candies here to get past that threshold because getting wild encounters is non-negotiable, and it goes without saying that level 46 is still an extremely low level that isn't recommended, especially how fast and easy some of these candies are to get. But in a blind run, I think it's important to save them until you know what you need to use them for. And a very important note here is that I have a whopping 7 rare candies left to tip the scales a little bit if I need it, but for now nothing's going to change. We're not making any learn set changes, and I think it's time to dive in and just see how things play out. Despite the lower level, Kyogre does fine here. Being a water type all but nullifies Lorelei's offense, and access to Thunderbolt just puts in work, which surprises nobody. It's not the fastest fight, but you can one-shot her second and third Pokemon. But I do kind of just ignore that I got growled by the Dugong. It ends up making the Jinx a 2-shot, even though I'm 90% sure it wouldn't one-shot it either way. And even though Lapras is annoying with Confuse Ray and Body Slam, I can just outpace, and this one's really not that bad at all. For Bruno, the solution is simple. 2 + 2 = 4. I just go straight surf, one-shot everything but the Machamp, and that's pretty much the standard Bruno battle, and there's no need to really talk about anything else. Agatha's a little bit interesting just because she has speed. I did learn Earthquake here to make it very simple, but when you don't outspeed that first Gengar, you're open up to losing a lot of time, whether it be like Confuse Ray or Hypnosis. And the good news is that just 2 extra levels would put us past that 137 speed threshold, and it would make this a much smoother experience. That's probably the route that I'll go because it would be a shame to mess up the run this late into it and take this kind of chance. 2 things for Lance: Thunderbolt, Ice Beam. You're never really going to outspeed the Aerodactyl, but that's not a big deal. We even take a Hyper Beam, which is basically the worst case scenario, and I make it through this one just fine, and that means that we have just 1 battle left. With a learn set like this, things are really straightforward. There's no setting up, and I do barely fail to knock out Pidgeot. It survives with just a measly 2 HP, but moving on to the next Pokemon, I neither outspeed the Alakazam nor do I get the one-shot with Earthquake. Just like Pidgeot, it looks like maybe a level or two might make this guaranteed, but I end up going for some bad move choices here just to try to save some PP, and I drag this out a little bit longer than it needs to be, but I'm still at half health. Things are still looking pretty good. Now from there, Surf is going to slice through the next couple of Pokemon, and now it's time for Executor testing. I did not bother to learn Blizzard here, but Ice Beam does look like it's a very comfortable two-shot, so it may always just have one chance for Hypnosis. And finally at the end, we do have Thunderbolt for Blastoise. It's a two-shot and it gets a full restore, so it costs a turn, but at the end of the day, everything considered, it really wasn't that bad, even with a couple of hiccups and being a low level. Kyogre finishes the blind run with a 1 hour, 57 minute, and 8 second time, and that's pretty impressive for a blind run. Anytime you're under 2 hours and still have a lot of work to do, as Professor Oak likes to say at the end of the Hall of Fame, you feel pretty confident. I'm gonna go get in the lab, not Oak's lab. I don't know why I'm saying the lab. I never say that. I've never said that in my life. But I'm gonna look at some things, maybe decide like if Origin Pulse can do more things. Should I keep Bubble Beam? Look at fights like Misty, Surge, Rival number 5, and I'll be back in about 3 seconds due to the power of video editing. I find often that when you're using a really good Pokemon, the initial route's usually going to be pretty good and the bulk of your time saves are going to come from cleaning up item usage. But I think when you get down to the numbers with this one, there's some mildly interesting things. Now for example, in the first tutorial battle and even on Rival number 2, Origin Pulse does more raw damage than Body Slam, and the big upside of using it is that a crit can just one-shot. It never happened for me, but I guess I can still tell you about it. And I thought I could maybe go this weird route where I would use Ancient Power on the first mandatory bug catcher, one-shot it, and save a little PP, but Origin Pulse is just the play once again. And if you're thinking it's funny that the little D in Shrek 3rd is misplaced, here's what happens. Look at this abomination happening on the screen right now, so I correct it and let's keep the run going. One of the biggest fundamental changes is accepting that Ancient Power is absolute garbage in comparison to our other moves, and keeping Bubble Beam is probably going to be the MVP overall of this run. It's funny because I looked back at my first run and I fell into the same exact trap. And I even solved this problem in a similar way, so that was kinda cool, I guess. But here we are rocking this kind of weird triple water move set here, but it did feel really smooth for a large portion of the game. In Mount Moon, I make 2 more decisions that do inject a little extra time early, but for a bigger payoff later. I'm not gonna be skipping the Mount Moon candy, and I'm gonna be doing the forbidden technique. I'm gonna be doing an optional battle and a cross-gen run. The Hacker's just really efficient, and in the case of this run, it's essentially another rare candy, if that makes sense. At least that's what I'm using it for. Now from here, I'm going to use the rare candy right before the Goldeen trainer. It's going to save a turn in this battle, and it's going to leverage the higher overall level to have a slightly better Misty fight, as well as push me to a higher level on Nugget Bridge. And it turns out that the slightly more accurate Aqua Tail can just take out Pidgeotto to make the fight seamless, but the most important thing about this playthrough is the consistency, that being just a little bit stronger coupled with the accuracy of Bubble Beam and the extra PP that it provides. It just makes things feel very nice. Now you already know this is a single highest cluster of mandatory battles in the game, and I was able to incrementally shave off a decent chunk of time through the way that I played the early game alone. On the SSN, this is where we start to make some cuts like the Gentleman Candy, and I decided to keep the Lieutenant Surge battle pretty much the same as the blind run. Now Aqua Tail can just slice down the first 2 Pokemon, but Raichu ends up being 2 separate 50-50 coin tosses. The first one is the speed tie, and then the other one is for Origin Pulse to one-shot. Now Surge uses an X speed, I fail the one-shot, but the end result ends up being the same, and now that's finally going to bring us to some split data. I'm going to be comparing to Mewtwo today because I messed up my Mega Rayquaza split data on the last run, but here's what it looks like. Now the Misty split, it's always off. I feel like I got to say that every single time. Someone comment down below and tell me I don't need to tell you guys that the Misty split is often off because you do it in different orders. Maybe you do Nugget Bridge first or whatever. But we do have a slight lead on the Brock split, and we have a really great early 2-minute lead up to this point, which is extremely impressive. And also here, let me bring up Calm Mind. Being a 1-stage boost it just made it more trouble than it was worth. Now, if you really had to be underleveled or had some really big struggles, it could push you past some battles, but Primal Kyogre is just so good that it never really needs the boost. And if you look at it on a turn-to-turn basis, using Calm Mind never really saves you significant turns to outweigh the moveset restraints that it puts on you extremely early. Now, I tested it, but a single straightforward damage set just yielded better results, and you're going to see that at the end of this. And even up to this point, I just have to stress once again how much of a godsend keeping Bubble Beam was, even in the mid game. Now, for example, in the Rocket Hideout, you can use Bubble Beam to get one-shots on every single Pokemon with the sole exception of Kangaskhan. It needs an Aqua Tail. But it kind of lets you hit this zen state where you aren't thinking about the route and you could just focus on what's happening on the screen, if that makes sense to anybody. Now, sometimes when you're playing these runs, when I'm playing these runs, I should say, you'll worry about what you're doing, if it's in the right order, what move you should be doing. If you're using a Pokemon with setup, you might be saying, how many times do I gotta set up here? What's written in my notes? And using a spammable move, it really lets you just kind of turn off your brain, which is a good thing for runs like this. Muscle memory is what allows you to really achieve like high tier times. So now, considering how rival number 5 went in the blind run, this is another area that got a major overhaul. Now, I'm actually going to hit up the 10th floor, and there are multiple reasons despite conventional wisdom telling you, hey, less battles equals better time. I'll come back to that thought in a minute, but going here lets me, number 1, I get the battle experience, and that's going to push me perfectly to the next level. Number 2, I need the items here, and number 3, I can do this really neat super menu that combines a lot of things. I use 4 rare candies, I use the Earthquake TM, and then I learned Ice Beam naturally at level 36, and this makes it feel extremely efficient. But I want to go on a slight tangent real quick. Now, first of all, minimum battles is a buzzword, and it will never be faster than a curated run that strategically picks up extra battles to maximize experience, candy use, or to maybe get you access to a TM like Body Slam, for example. If minimum battles is your thing and you like doing it, that's fine. No one's telling you to not do that. I'm just giving some thoughts here. I'm not telling anyone how to play your game. I'm just saying that I personally only care about getting the fastest time, and minimum battles has never brought me those results. I'm not even saying this for any specific reason. And tangent aside, this is a huge power-up moment for Kyogre, and the difference in the rival number 5 fight, it kind of just tells the tale. The levels along with Ice Beam means that every single Pokemon with the exception of Blastoise is a one-shot, and what was once a slow and sluggish battle that I even reset on becomes something that you can just roll over, and that's ultimately what you want to see when you start to do repeat runs and you start refining your route. From there, I did plan my bags to be full so we can avoid the gym leaders just yapping at us, and picking up a protein in the Safari Zone for that sole purpose helped me achieve that goal. And from this point, Kyogre's basically done all of the preparation, and it's time to start going through the rest of the game at a blistering pace. Erika, Koga, Blaine, they're all in back-to-back succession, as well as Sabrina, but I do need to slow it down and say I made a slight mistake. I was supposed to use the rest of my candies after Blaine. Now, this was kind of a late change, a late addition, and my muscle memory wasn't quite there yet, so I didn't even know I was making a mistake at the time, and here's why I really didn't notice. It was really to help a few ranges here and there, but I still just one-shot all of Sabrina's Pokemon, so it's not even on my radar at this point, and I'm just kind of locked in during this playthrough. And as I take out Giovanni and then easily progress my way through the rival number 6 fight, there are 2 things that kind of tipped me off and made me kind of take a pause and see what was happening. Now, number 1, I didn't one-shot the Alakazam in the rival number 6 fight, and it got me wondering how I missed a range that I specifically looked at. And as I finish off the battle, I do what I was always doing. I go ahead and pop all my candies, and I was level 49. I was only supposed to be level 48. And guys, I have to be completely honest with you. I thought I completely threw this run entirely, but I guess the fact that you're watching this means it's not the case. And let's just take a look at this beautiful split data up to this point. Now, obviously some things are out of order, but the important thing to note is that Primal Kyogre has a 1 minute and 17 second lead after Giovanni, and it even slightly builds on that lead at the start of the Elite Four. Now, this means if Kyogre can just take care of business, it has a chance to easily handle Mewtwo, which, let me remind you, only 2 Pokemon have ever done it, but let's kind of just talk about it. The Elite Four was already pretty simple even at a lower level, so these extra levels just make things flow that much more smoother. And in terms of Pokemon, I think it's the best feeling when you're both a higher level but also really far ahead of your previous times. But I do have to admit I was really pressured to perform here since I already kind of messed up the candies. And I'm not sure what caused this. When I initially looked, I thought I'd be at 138 speed going into Gengar, and just a weird quirk and just the order of using candies and cutting out battles, I was only at 137 speed, which is a speed tie, but I just win the speed tie and it doesn't even matter. But it is something I planned for and just kind of like failed at, but it didn't really matter. Another bit of serendipitous luck, kind of like using the candies later. For the champion battle, level 53 felt pretty good. Pidgeotta's now a one-shot, Alakazam still outspeeds, and it does waste a turn here or there. And after what Surf ultimately does what it does against the middle Pokemon, I held my breath and just really hoped that we wouldn't see a Hypnosis. All we end up seeing is a Stomp, but the champion, he's still determined to waste a little bit more time with a full restore. But at the end of the day, Kyogre passes the finish line with flying colors. Ladies and gentlemen, Primal Kyogre clocks in at 1 hour, 44 minutes, and 23 seconds, beating the Mewtwo bar and Mega Rayquaza. That's going to earn it a tier card rating of 101.22, and it's going to secure the number 2 spot on the tier list. Now, even with the small slip of forgetting to use the candies after Blaine, Primal Kyogre didn't even flinch. It still hit the damage ranges, and using later candies actually just made me a little bit higher of a level. And just to be very clear, I do not think redoing this run would give me better results. This is not a Mega Rayquaza situation. I think two things are very clear to me. Number one, Primal Groudon is going to have such a rough time living up to the hype. There's no way it can live up to it. And number two, I think Mega Mewtwo Y is untouchable. Not even this immaculate run could get within a minute of it. And I'm not sure there's a Pokemon that ever could. I think it's the best iteration of anything ever. Mega Mewtwo Y was amazing. But that's pretty much all I got for you. Special shout out to my channel members and patrons. The support means a lot. And if you made it this far in the video, you're a real one. I really, really do appreciate it. And I guess I'll see you on the next one. Bye.